Assalamu alaikum. Today we will be discussing Thomas Hardy, his biography, his style, and an explanation of his poem The Darkling Thrush. Thomas Hardy is a transitional poet, meaning appeared between 19th century, 20th century, exactly 1828, died 1940. It means he lived in the two centuries. This is his photo. You can see that his hairstyle, his clothes, his shirt, his tie and the mustache, different from early Victorians. If you remember the photo I gave you of Tennyson, for instance. Let us start with his biography and his style. As I mentioned before, that he is a transitional poet between two centuries. We could distinguish him as Victorian in his themes, but he is modern poet in his new technique, especially irony, which he used in his poems. His view of life is a pessimistic one, a sad one. We don't see such a view when we read, for instance, Tennyson or Browning or Arnold. Touches of hope are always there, since they are social reformers. Definitely they should adopt an optimistic view of life. However, Thomas Hardy, in his style, you could, as readers, see that he is sardonic, very bitter and cynical. Concerning religion, his attitude is usually casual attitude towards religion. He is an agnostic poet. If you read about agnosticism, which is in Arabic la adriya, concerning the existence of God or the divine as unknown, or human reason is incapable of providing sufficient rational grounds to justify either the belief that God exists or the belief that God does not exist. This probably explains his casual attitude towards religion. Originally he is a novelist, but he stopped writing novels for some reasons. Jude the Obscure was his last novel, and after that he quit and turned to poetry. He explained this shift from novel writing to verse writing, that novels, especially Jude the Obscure, did not receive an approval. It did not give much money. And the second reason for quitting writing novels is that he sees himself as a poet more than a novelist. Meaning what? He can express himself better using the intensive language of poetry. When we start with the darkling thrush, we look at the title. The title is significant because it gives a dark and sad impression from the beginning. The novel, the poem itself. But when we see the title, the thrush is a bird, a small bird. Definitely it's a source of hope. But to describe the thrush as darkling, this is what is significant. It gives a dark, sad impression about the poem itself. And this is very obvious from the beginning of the poem. Thomas Hardy used different images like frost, spectre, grey, winter, weakening eye of the day, broken lyres. Such images reflect the sad feeling the poet feels at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. Hardy does not feel happy with the coming of the new century. The weather shows the coldness of the physical world, which reflects the emotional coldness of people. If we search for an explanation of such negative feeling, is that the Victorian society, the Victorian era, the industrial Victorian is basically a material society. Hence it is sad, cold, that is to say, because since they are always thinking of money, their hearts tend to be hard-hearted. I gave you a slide with the picture of the thrush, a beautiful small bird, but Hardy does not see the bird in this way. This picture shows the bird and the bleak atmosphere. The frost is everywhere, and the first image in the poem, which is the gate, the coming from the 19th century, entering the 20th century, both are the same in the eyes of Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy goes on to describe society, his society, as complicated. Hence he uses the image of tangled vine stems. It's so complicated with the problems. If you remember earlier, we mentioned the problems of Victorian society, the social problems, the poverty, the unemployment, the suffering of the workers, the doubt and faith, this conflict. Hence society is broken, just like a broken lyres. It's for the lack of values. It's out of tune. There is no harmony in it. But still man needs love and warmth. Hence the image of fires refers to such need for love. The vision of the new century is vague. It's shadowy like a spectre, and it's grey, vague. Everything is desolate. The 19th century passed as a corpse, dead body. Also, 19th century is windy, full of troubles, as I mentioned before, death and dry. Hardy does not feel happy when 20th century came. He does not welcome it. This is the case with other people. Every spirit, he says, upon earth seemed as fervorless as I. They are not feeling happy about the 20th century. And if we stand at this line as if he is predicting what will happen in the 20th century, exactly 20th century, the beginning of 20th century is not encouraging, was not encouraging the First World War, then the Second World War. It's destruction. He's right when he described that everything is desolate. Here comes the singing of the bird. The bird itself is a sign of hope, joy. He used this word. But unfortunately, what kind of a bird is this thrush? At the beginning with the title, he described the bird as darkling. When we come to the poem, we see he gave a description of this bird. It's an aged one, frail, it means weak, thin, and small. It's a sign of hope, but it is not that much hope. There is always a growing gloom and darkness. Since it is the beginning of a new year, so there is a Christmas and there is the sound of carolings. People are celebrating the new year, but there is a blessed hope. But Hardy is unaware, and this is what he mentioned in his poem at the very end. When we look at the poem and try to see the moral message behind this poem, we could summarize the whole poem as I see it, that man should not lose hope despite the problems which surround him. So let us not be like Thomas Hardy, though he is very realistic, but his realistic style tend to be pessimistic. Although there is the sign of hope of the bird itself. I hope that you understood this beautiful poem with the beautiful images, and try to compare Thomas Hardy with the style of earlier Victorians like Tennyson, Browning, Arnold. You could see that he is completely or almost completely different from them. See you in other poems.